Hello, everyone. You're very, very welcome back to episode 2 of the Backspin podcast. I'm very happy to be joined for today's episode by Mr. Tadhg Harrington. Tadhg obviously needs no introduction, is well known up and down the country in the pitch and putt scene. Tadhg, thanks for joining. How are things? I suppose just after the Christmas break with the off season, how have things been for yourself?
Very good, Philip. I played plenty of pitch and putt actually over Christmas. We don't really have an off season. There's a group of us that play most of the time anyway, so we skipped back and forth between the frost and the bad weather, and we got plenty of pitch and putt in, and we enjoyed it. So no, everything's good. Had a lovely Christmas.
Brilliant. Well, look, I suppose we did kind of start off with the first episode and kind of reviewing 2025, and I want to kick off this morning kind of doing the same thing with yourself. Obviously a very, very competitive player up and down the country. If you're not playing at Scratch Cups most weekends, and people wonder where you are. So I suppose with reflecting on your journey in 2025 from a pitch and putt point of view, how would you evaluate your season?
Yeah, very happy. I improved. When I first came into the game 4 years ago, this is my 5th year, I greatly underestimated how good the top guys are. And it's something that I do feel in the game that's not promoted enough, how good at the top level the elite players are. And that includes some of the ladies as well. I was very fortunate to play with Amy Galvin in Tullamore lately and was super impressed with how good a player she is. Obviously, Chrissy needs no introduction. So that was something that kind of took me by surprise, was the quality of the top end players. And a question I'm often asked, Philip, is, if Shane and Porrick were to play, Kieran Earl, say, and take any of the top players, John, say around Collins or around Brough, would they win? And I honestly don't think they would. Yes, they would adapt if you gave them 6 months, or I'm sure that they would catch up, but it's such a different game in terms of strike, and I know we're going to talk about that later on, that I genuinely think that people outside of the game do not realise how good the top guys are. So that was a big eye-opener for me. But very happy this season. I've certainly improved. My scoring average has come down a lot, and I've had some very, very low rounds, which I wouldn't have had maybe a couple of years ago. So delighted, but a long way to go. If you want to make it to the top of this game, Philip, as you know yourself, it's a tough road, because it's very competitive and they are very, very good.
Yeah, and Tadhg, what would you put your scoring average coming down to? Is that practicing, travelling up and down the country every weekend to play in Scratch Cups, or is it kind of putting practice in during the week? Because obviously you've been around golf so long, and the approach that's kind of taken there from a professional standpoint as a trainer. Have you kind of applied those principles in your pitch and putt game maybe this year, or has there been any changes in the approach?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I did. I played for maybe a year the first year. I got down to scratch very quick, but I didn't realise, the difference between, a scratch player and a really good plus player. It's like a lot. And it would be definitely practice routines, and I'm sure we're going to discuss that later when we're talking about juveniles, but certainly I would have a practice regime where I'm in work. I would hit balls virtually every day, and that's something else that I think the public sometimes are not aware of. And I've had an awful lot of the top players up to me for consultation. We chat about swings and putting styles and stuff like that. And the one thing I will say to you, Philip, is I don't know of anyone at the top end of the game doesn't play every day, or virtually every day. It's that competitive. So yeah, that's how I would have certainly approached it. I would have approached it the way that I would have if someone came to me for, say, golf and they wanted to improve. I certainly would have put the same program in place. And And for me, it's not practice or hard work or anything like that. I actually love the game, and I think that anyone who's any good at anything, they jump up in the morning and they want to do it. If you don't want to do it, there's plenty of people who do. So I actually really enjoy the game anyway, aside from the practice element of it. And I think that, going back to your question, how do you improve? Improve the quality of your striking, and make sure that your bad shot is, the edge of the green or whatever. It's not destructive. If you see, inters or juniors, Philip, they generally have a bad shot in their game that's going to cost them a double bogey or, bogeys anyway. And if you look at the top level, their striking is of a standard that if they're not putting for birdies all the time, they're certainly making threes. So that was kind of how I did it. I just applied what I would have learned through my years in America to pitch and putt, and it's working well. I definitely have improved, certainly in the last year.
Super. And look, I suppose, what would you feel would be your highlight from 2025? I obviously was very fortunate to watch the All Irelands down in Riverdale, the over 55s, which you were competing in quite competitively for a long part of the way before. I'm trying to remember now. It's going to come to my name, to my brain.
Chris Scannell.
Yes, he decided to go and shoot a bizarre round that I don't think anyone ever saw coming. But yeah, what would your highlight be from? Would it be maybe placing in the All Ireland, or was there anything else?
For me, I led for a lot that day. It was a terrible day down there. It was very, very gale force wind and greens that were like lightning. You could put off them. And I led for a long way. Chris obviously got a great start in the second round. He started birdie hole in one, and he kind of pulled away. I enjoyed it. I actually was very pleased with how I held myself together in tough conditions. I did my highlights. I had a couple of chances for 39, and two great chances for 39 in my home club, or one of my home clubs, Fairview, which I'm hugely involved in, looking after the greens, and I'm on committee there and that. That was exciting. I couldn't have done that before. Plenty of 40s and 41s and 42s. So, yeah, that would have been a highlight for me, seeing the improvement in my game throughout the year, and certainly playing against better players and performing against them. I think that's something, again, that people don't realise. It's easy to do a good score when you're out playing with the lads in McDonough, like you do, Philip.
Yeah.
It's hard when it's Ian Dillon standing on the other side of the tee box, or Eamon Gibney in Meath. But that's been a great advantage for me, and it's something that I'm sure we'll discuss later when you ask me a question about juveniles. Certainly what I've tried to do is play with the best players I can find. I was in Tullamore on Tuesday with Anthony Galvin. I think that is the only way to improve. Put yourself out there, play against the best players, and certainly play away from home. That's hugely important, Philip, in terms of trying to improve. Anyone can be good on their home course. It's extremely difficult. I've gone to Tullamore maybe 10 or 15 times since the trial, at the end of the year, not the trial, the FIPA event.
Yeah.
And I only won the other day for the first time. So it takes that amount of play. It takes 10 or 15 times to get used to a course to be able to shoot the 9, 10, 11 unders that you need to compete with those guys down there. So that's certainly something when we talk about juveniles that I would be saying to you, play against better players all the time, and that's how he'll improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think that brings us on nicely to the next point that I wanted to kind of touch on, which was you're obviously playing against the best players up and down the country week in, week out at Scratch Cups, national events and provincial events as well. That obviously brings a certain sort of pressure. And you mentioned yourself there, you held yourself together quite well in the seniors event last year. How have you got any sort of routine around managing pressure in I suppose those environments with those top players?
I think I'll tell you a funny story, and he'll probably laugh when he hears this. He doesn't realise it's Sean Goggins, good friend of mine. I played with Sean in Kilbeggan a couple of years ago in I think it was a trial for something, and I'd never played with Sean before, and I played terrible. It was nerve-wracking because I hadn't played with him. But I've since played with him. I played with him in Laytown and played great with him. It's that getting used to playing with these really good players, and it's only through years of experience. I would find it very hard to believe that someone could come into this game and be really good after a year or two. I do agree. I got great advice at the start from the likes of George McGrail and Stephen Murray in Dublin when I was playing up there, that it just takes an awful lot longer than you think to get used to courses, to get used to different conditions, the quirkiness of different courses. 40 metres is not the same on one course versus another. It just isn't. They play different. There's a hole in Tullamore, it's 38 metres. No more plays 38 metres. But that's typical in all courses. You get holes that play longer or shorter, and it does take time to, get used to the flow of the course, where the scoring parts of the course are, where the difficulties are, where you need to be careful not to be too aggressive. I had the pleasure of playing Rochford Bridge for the first time the other day. Obviously the seniors is here this year, and straight away there's probably 10 scoring holes that you can pick up on. There's 3 or 4 reasonably tough holes, and then there's 3 or 4 holes, Philip, as you probably know, that are absolutely make it 3 and run for your life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It takes time to learn that, and like the key highlights and the lessons from this year for me, I saw a huge jump in my performance, was that the realisation, take your time. You can't rush it. You look at John, and I'd be very good friends with John. I've chatted to him a lot about the game. He's doing it 20, 30 years, wherever he's doing it, and it's just like walking to him. So you just can't catch up with that experience or that level of play in the space of 2 years. Certainly I would think 5 or 6 years would be the minimum you'd need to be competitive at that level.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I totally agree with what you've said. I'm on a similar kind of time frame journey into the game, which is, you're coming from the background that you've got various years, multiple years of experience training and coaching people in the golfing side of things, and obviously transitioning that will help over time. But I'm sure there's people that might pick up on this podcast at some stage that mightn't be competitive and might be just stepping into the game. And I suppose the competitive aspect is brilliant, and there's so many people up and down the country that enjoy that side of it. And then we've also got the other part where you're involved as well, Tadhg, with the scrambles, the more friendly approach to kind of get people introduced to the game, which is something we obviously need to sing from the top of the trees as well, because we do of course need more people, and I am going to touch on that maybe a little bit later on. Tadhg, I'm going to move on to I'm going to take you back, I suppose maybe, and I'd like to kind of go through an early reeling in the years episode, so to speak, with your kind of background and your experience and your time that you had spent in America. You've obviously caddied as well on professional tours, so that's obviously giving you a different insight as well. But let's go back to the start. Obviously you're one of the most famous names in golf in Ireland with obviously your brother Pádraig, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I just want to check. You've obviously got a very competitive household growing up. I suppose take me back to the years of maybe competing with one another, or if that even happened, or just kind of the overview of the household growing up in such a I suppose what would on the outside look a very competitive environment.
Absolutely, 5 boys, brought up in sport. Pádraig was the youngest, and we were all very good at golf. We were all somewhere between scratch and 2 or 3 or 4, that type of handicap. My father played, I had an uncle who played, and then there was the brothers, and it was very competitive, as you can imagine. And there's back to playing with better players. Pádraig, when he was younger, up to about 15 years of age, we beat him up a stick every week, And then in 1 year, he went from, say, 4 handicap to 4 or 5 handicap to scratch. And we could never beat him again. So, he benefited from playing with better players all the time. He saw what we were doing. He went off and adjusted his game, for that, to try and improve. Obviously, then I caddied for him all the way through his amateur career, and I worked on the LPGA Tour and the PGA Tour with Titleist. I was with a player on the LPGA Tour, and on the PGA Tour I was with Titleist itself. So I got a great experience. I was in America for 3 years with the Titleist Performance Institute. I was in and out all the time. Did a lot of seminars for them in America, Europe, and did a big one here in Ireland, in City West. So would have been brought up in that environment of coaching and just being involved in golf all my life. Did play a bit of pitch and putt when I was, as usual, 8, 9, 10. And then a common story, Philip, that you see, and I met lots of guys like this and girls. They played pitch and putt when they were young, they went off, had families or whatever. Something else got in the way, and then they come back again.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that. And I think that I'd love to see more people doing that. I was surprised, as I was saying to you earlier, about how good the game is and how competitive it is. But, I do think it's important as well, and you just touched on it there about, going forward. It's not just the senior part of the game that's important for men or women. It's all aspects of the game to try and get people into the game, because there's so much competition, Philip.
Yeah.
There's so much, the GAA, which do a great job recruiting players. There's sporting clubs. There's everything under the sun now. And it's very hard then to convince people to get into pitch and putt, into the game itself. So that's something, since I came from tour, I've seen the top end of the scale in golf. You then come into a sport like pitch and putt, and I can see many things that you could do to improve it. But that's going to take time. It's not something that we can change overnight. And there's many good people in the game that are aware of what needs to be done to improve the game. And of course it can be improved. We can always improve everything in life,
Yeah, absolutely. No, completely agree. And I suppose with obviously such a fantastic time, I'd imagine, with that you'd spent in America with Titleist and on the ladies PGA Tour, what sort of influence has that had on your kind of approach to pitch and putt, because obviously that's such a serious and it's a professional environment, and there's a lot of conversation to be had about pitch and putt. You could nearly say, with how good the standard is, it is a professional game. And what's the influence been from that background and then stepping into kind of the pitch and putt side of things?
Well, for me, I've just taken the exact same approach that I saw in golf. I would never miss a day that I don't hit shots. It would be just a dreadful day for me. I enjoy it. I think that at the top level in golf, you see it. They have practice routines, and it's not that I'd stand there and hit 1,000 golf balls, but I certainly would stand there and hit balls for 10 minutes and then go off and do a lesson, or I might hit a few putts. I do something. Yeah. I might play maybe every second or third day in the winter, and I might play a lot in the summer. So it's not killing yourself or flogging yourself to death. It's the little and often is always going to win the day. It's the same in golf. Take out Tiger Woods and Pádraig and those guys who practice excessively. You don't need to do that. It certainly, and I would have done a lot of work on cognitive learning when I was in America for my sports science. When I was studying sports science, it's little and often, without a shadow of a doubt. The tortoise is always going to win that race. It's just about doing a little bit each and every day. If you want to improve an awful lot, right? There's also the social side of the game. So, I'm not saying it's for everyone, but it is for me, and I know it's for an awful lot of the top players. Some of them are very quiet about it, but they're doing it every day. So, but they enjoy it. It's not as if it's a hardship, you know. And it's like the joy of when you're a young fella and you're out there practicing and you go around town. I was talking to a guy yesterday, Joe Murray. He's a PGA pro, but he used to play in Iron. And he was telling me yesterday they'd be down there at 9 o'clock in the morning. They'd play 6 rounds. They had to be off the course at 6. So, you know, that joy of being a young fella and running around. I see that in golf in young fellas as well. And I do see that at the top end of the game with an awful lot of the really good players. They love the game. They absolutely love it. So, you know, it's something that I just took from golf, to be honest with you. And I haven't met anyone yet that's just so naturally talented. Maybe John would be the closest thing I've seen that has just got a very natural, unique swing to him. But, you know, any of the other guys, like Ray Murphy when he was in his prime, was playing every day. Damien Fleming, every day, you know, most days. And that's why they're so good.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
No, true. That's true. And there's obviously a perception, and I was fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time with you as well last year, at the back end of last year, and you were very I suppose I was blown away with just the high level of information in such a short space of time around golf and pitch and putt. There is a perception out there, and I think you would agree. A lot of people that step into the game assume that playing pitch and putt is a similar kind of mechanical swing to golf. But from our discussions, it sounds like that's not the case, and I'm kind of wanting to pick your brains a little bit on that for people that may be listening. One thing that you mentioned to me was, and I actually was shocked at the time. That'll tell you, you know, kind of my understanding on the mechanics of a swing. We had discussed what I was doing, and the first thing you said to me, Philip, you're not hitting up on the ball. And obviously that's what a lot of the top guys do. There's a perception that maybe it's a golf swing, you're swinging down on the ball, you're looking for distance. Maybe talk me a little bit through the mechanics, Tadhg, of a pitch and putt swing, or a good pitch and putt swing, because obviously there's so many different swings out there.
They're two totally different games. Yeah. So anyone who tells you that pitch and putt's good for your short game in golf don't know what they're talking about. So in pitch and putt, you are trying to... So there's two variables. This now is at the top end, and this is just a hypothetical conversation. It's not for the normal people out there. You've asked the question, so I'll tell you. The first parameter you're trying to get rid of is backspin. So you do not want the ball to rip or come back down the green. And in pitch and putt, because the greens are small, there's an awful lot of slopes. And in championships, they put the flags on slopes, which is what they should do. So first parameter to get rid of is backspin. That's caused by hitting up on the ball. So the effect of hitting up on the ball puts spin on the ball, but not backspin. Second thing is, when you get to a really high level, is trying to get rid of left spin. Left spin comes from normal release in a golf club. So the normal release pattern, the ball will land and it'll kick left. It's extremely difficult to get the ball to cut, to move to the right with a wedge, 58 degree or 54 or whatever you're using. But if you can do that, if you can get the ball to land, as they call it, drop and stop, that's the top end of the game. So it's an upward hit, number one, and number two, you're trying to hold the face open. So why is John so good? I followed him around Royston last year, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's very, very... You see all these different styles, and I've had most of the top guys in with me. They don't want anyone to know that, and I'm not going to mention names. I'm missing very few of them. I'm maybe missing 2 or 3 of the really top guys. And I did a bit of work I got Chrissy down in Luke, and did I get Amy yet? I'm not sure whether I got Amy yet, but I'm sure I'll ask her shortly, because I'm very interested in swings. And the one thing you notice, that you'll say, there's many different ways, and one guy does this and one guy does that, and you look at George McGrail and you look at John, you look at John Cahill, very short backswings, and you say, oh God, I couldn't do that. But if you look at them at impact, they're all the very same. So they're very square through the ball and they're all hitting up on it. There's not one top class pitch and putt player is hitting down, because that causes backspin. So in golf, you're hitting down on the ball, and in pitch and putt, because it's on a tee, you're hitting up. But you're also trying to hold the face open. You don't want the face to turn over early, because that's what causes left spin. Now that's quite technical, but you did ask.
Yeah.
So I have found as well, chipping is totally different. It's a totally different style, because you're trying to chip in all the time. It's more along the ground. And then to really flummox you altogether, putting is totally different. It's more, the tempo is different in pitch and putt. It's more of a wrap. It's more of not a long, languid stroke. It's more of a short backswing or a shorter backswing, and more of a clip than a long, languid stroke. So there's three elements: chipping, putting, and pitching, all totally different to golf. There are some similarities, but pitch and putt is a different game. And that's why I allude back to Pádraig and Shane Lowry. Would they catch the two boys in time? Yes, they would. They can adapt. Their hand-to-eye coordination is fabulous. But if they went out and played John and Kieran Earls tomorrow, say in Brough, they wouldn't have a chance. Not a hope. Because unless they're going to go around in 17, 18 under par for 18 holes, they've no chance, because that's what the lads will be doing. So, at the top end, and I've, videoed a lot of swings and studied the game, it is different, but they're all doing the exact same thing through impact.
Yeah.
There's Cooper's given up on the video analysis of swings. But it's fascinating, because obviously no one else has really studied it so far. I think I'm the first kind of fully qualified golf coach that's come into the game, and I find it fascinating to look at the different styles, but that they're doing the same thing. I do think, and I said this, I tell a great story about Pádraig and Darren Clark, just talking about confidence. And the way guys say to you, Philip, oh, your man looks very confident. I always tell this story. We were playing in the south of Ireland years ago. I was caddying for Pádraig. We're waiting on the tee to tee off, and it's in Lahinch. And into the car park whizzes in a big white Merc, and Darren jumps out, and he's the driver in hand, and the metal spikes on. You can hear him coming across the car park, and he's up next. 1 minute to go to his tee time, and he stands up. His opponent hits, and then Darren stands up and blasts at 300 yards with the middle, and off they went. And I remember people saying, God, doesn't he look very confident? And he's, he really is. He's the real deal. Except that an hour earlier, myself and Pádraig were out warming up in a club across the road, and who was there? Darren Clark. So, this is this phenomenon about, you look at Kieran Earls, or you look at John Callaghan, John Wells, Stephen Shore, fellas like that, and you look at them on the first tee and they look very confident. But they're confident through the work they've done. Eamon Gibney's a brilliant example of that. Very quiet guy, very kind of self-assured, and he's like a silent assassin, a bit like Dylan down in Kildare, your part of the country. They put the work in. Like, Eamon works as hard as anyone at the game. He'll tell you he doesn't, but he does. And he's a super player because of that. And they exude this quiet confidence, but it comes from practice, Philip. Yeah. It comes from knowing that, knowing that they've done the work. This year I had a very, very stressful situation. I played for Meath in the inter-county, and I remember standing on the first tee. It was in Inniskeen, and of course now you're playing for a team, and it's very, very, nerve-wracking. My first time, and stood in the first tee anyway in the singles. And I remember taking the club back, and big crowd there. There's 50, 100 people at the tee, and I took the club back, and I always remember I said to myself, God, this feels great. And I hit it to about a foot, less 6 inches. And I'm walking down the fairway, and I said, God, that was good. But it was just the confidence of knowing the work I'd done, that the club was in the right place. Yeah. And I think that's something that people need to understand. no one, I very rarely have met anyone who's, more confident than someone else, or they might show they're more confident, but it's to do with the work they put into the game. It's the confidence of knowing you've done the work.
It gives them I suppose it probably gives them that inner belief to say that they can go out and perform. And
absolutely. I'd hear people saying, you'd look at some of the Cork players, they look a bit arrogant, but it's not that. It's that they've done the work. They're super players. And I know from talking to a lot of them, like, they're really nice guys. They're not like that at all.
Yeah.
But they have that outward look of confidence because they've done the work.
Yeah.
And they've been very lucky to be able to compete against, very good players. Had a great conversation with John Cahill lately about all the years growing up playing against John. But John thinks that's a great thing for him because, he's always been under that thumb. And then Ray Murphy comes along and he's like the Tiger Woods of pitch and putt. So it's very difficult when you're playing against those type of players. But if you embrace it, which John Cahill did, you become a super player yourself. And he's won a couple of nationals since.
Yeah.
And probably should have won more by his own admission, but super player. But he puts the work in, so I do think that sometimes people say to me, he looks very confident, doesn't he? But really, it's a false bravado. It comes from work.
Absolutely, and I think, to be fair, you gave two great examples there with John Walsh and John Cahill, because that was my probably perception initially as well. Jesus, like, these guys look so serious. What is that? And it's like you then kind of see them play 2 or 3 times, and it's like that is just confidence and knowing. And then obviously once you get speaking to them, it's much more relaxed. It's you can see their personality shine through, which obviously is great as well, because those are the sort of characters that we need in the game. And I think as well, the approach that those, I suppose you could say, they're role models, so to speak, and that's probably, I don't want to be blowing up anyone's ego too much, but it's very much something that we need to kind of make sure that the next generation get to see and get exposure to as well. And I am going to link that in with kind of the juvenile question that I had for you in a couple of moments' time. But before I do that, I want to touch on the current situation, I suppose, or the current outlook on pitch and putt in general across the country. We're obviously seeing more countries being incorporated into FIPA this year, which is obviously great. But what's your kind of perception at the moment, Tadhg, where the game sits at the minute?
So, for me, I think there's, and this is said in a nice way, I think there's always room for improvement. I think that we're under the umbrella of the Sports Council, and, we need to be more professional. That's absolutely no reflection on, anyone in the game at the moment. There's lots of very, very good people in the game, but we could always improve it. So you might say, how? I went out to play pitch and putt during COVID. So this is how I got into it. And I went home and I hated it. I had 9 threes and 9 4s in CY. And I went home and I said, I'm never playing that game again. Hate that game. Couldn't understand how you couldn't keep the ball on the green. And looked at a video online, and who came up? Shane Murphy, the late great, in Sea Point. I think it was 2016. It was the national match play. And who was in the ladies' final? I know it was Ger Ward and a girl from, one of the good girls from Cork, I think, was in the ladies. So I watched both finals and I was blown away by the standard. I said, oh God, I'll give this another go. So to answer your question, how did I get into the game? I looked at a video of Shane Murphy and I said, I'll have to give it another go. Gave it another go, made it 2. I always remember the first time I shot 49, I thought it was after winning the Olympics. Now I realised it was nothing. But anyway, so that's how I got into the game. So to answer your question about where do we stand, certainly we've made huge progress with Backspin coming back in a video format and video on the different events, as you were saying there, Philip. I think that's super important. I really do. It's how I got into the game. I'm looking at Shane Murphy and I'm going, I want to do that. How do you stop the ball on those greens? They're white. I remember vividly saying that to myself. So I think that's one area of the game. I think that from a financial point of view, there's plenty of grants out there. I'm actually meeting with the CEO shortly we're applying for a grant in Fairview, but I know I was at the AGM, at the Mead AGM the other night, and I know Suzanne Jordan was there talking about funding for different clubs and the amount of clubs that came up and asked, how do we get that? And, you know, she was saying that they're going to run webinars for it and stuff like that. I think that's super important. I do think that, you know, the clubs trying to work with each other. I work with a guy in Rathfy called Jimmy Brown. He comes out, does a lot of work for us in Fairview. I go out, do a lot of work for him. We did a bit of work in Stackallen this year. It's the only way forward, Philip. We've all got to help each other in terms of sharing equipment and sharing time and resources. Most courses are using greenkeepers that are doing it for the love of the game. They're not getting paid, as I am in Fairview. I think that, you know, the likes of Stephen Murray, who's obviously a full-time greenkeeper, who is advising the NEC and the Dublin board and that on greenkeeping. He's been fantastic advice he's given me and others. And I think that's something going forward. And I know it's in discussion. I'd love to see a greenkeeping course. So I'd love to see a dedicated, maybe meet once a month with Stephen and, you know, bring up the standards of greenkeeping. So that's one part of the game. I think the funding part is very important. Another thing that I think, because I come from a computer science background when I was younger, and, you know, I would be very au fait with AI and study all that sort of stuff. I like all that sort of stuff. I do think the website, whereas it's good, Jason in Kerry showed how it can be great.
Unbelievable.
So, thank you. And you're not going to believe this. That's basic stuff in the AI world now. You know, I was there last night, just have it on my phone as an app, and I was just looking through it. What a job he's done. But, you know, that should be the standard for the future. So what do I mean by that, Philip? Now, I'm not saying this happens tomorrow. Before everyone jumps up and says, oh my God, I don't know how to use a computer. I get that. Yeah. And I know there's an awful lot of older people in the game. And they're very important too. And we're going to discuss that at the end when we're talking about juveniles and that, because there are different sections in the game. But online entry for competitions, I mean, such a simple thing in this day and age, right? Have a look at Jason's work. It's that simple. You enter online, you pay your fee online, and the computer does the draw. It generates the draw.
Yeah,
I can't believe it. I'm after drawing Damien Fleming twice. Hard luck. It's the computer who did it. No more getting anything wrong. It's a computer generated thing. Gives the girls in the office, as you know, they do an unbelievable job in the office. I mean, I can't say enough for the girls in the office. They just are so helpful as well. Yeah. But it gives them time. So online, now someone's going to jump up and say, but sure, I don't know how to use a computer. But we can have maybe the secretary of the club for the first year or two will be able to help you.
Yeah.
So you go, say you're the chair this year in McDonagh.
Yeah.
So someone comes to you and says, Philip, I have no idea how to use. Can you give me a hand? So you would nominate someone in the club that's a bit of a whiz kid and say, look, there's 3 or 4 members there, few ladies only after joining the club. They don't really know how to do. Can you show them? So there is ways around it. That's a great way of improving it. I think the website could be improved. I know I've spoken to Frank Deneen a lot about this, and he's aware of it. And I think that, you know, it should be your first port of call. It should be an app on your phone. You want to do something, what's on next week? Should be on your phone. This is the society we live in these days. Yeah. So that to me is a huge area where we could improve. Yeah. Online registration takes away work, online draws. Let's talk about handicaps. They are just so bad. So why? It's a bit like the golf situation. We fellas walking around in golf, there's a guy, and he's a really nice guy, and I won't mention his name, but there's a guy playing off +6 or 7 in golf who works in McGurk's. Now, that's just crazy stuff, right? We're in double figures for +3 handicappers in Ireland. So that kind of is wrong in terms of, I would consider myself, even with a stroke average of around 48.5, to be probably a good +1 player. I think there has to be back to the old days, and I've said it to Frank, of, the only people in the country that can hold +3 are the 2 national champions, maybe for a year or 2. +2 you should have a stroke average of around 47-ish. +1 probably 48, and then scratch is probably 49. This is the metric that's used on the PGA Tour. It doesn't lie. Now, you have to play so many rounds. You're limited to how many rounds you can count from your home club. You can't play multi-cards from your home club. There's more weighting towards the provincial and the senior championships in terms of stroke average. But it doesn't lie.
Yeah.
If you play 70 or 80 rounds and you have a stroke average of X, it doesn't matter what anyone tells you. It's true. It's right. There has to be a minimum number of clubs that you play. So I played 17 outside of my home club last year. If you look at Ian Dillon, played 88 rounds. I think he was in the mid 48s as well. You can hardly say Ian Dillon is not a 6 under par man on average playing 88 rounds. So I think Ray Murphy was 77. Again, he was a very low 48 or maybe a high 47 maybe. Yeah. And you can't lie. I think the handicap system, a little bit like golf, it's easily manipulated. So, going forward, I'd love to see more emphasis on the stroke average, along with the handicaps being curtailed and at the top end. And a very interesting conversation. I was talking to Suzanne Jordan not so long ago, and she was talking about some junior lady she met in Clog, and said to her, I'd love to know where I stand in the game. And I said to Sue, wouldn't it be great if we had a stroke average for everyone? This is not about senior players, Philip. I know we talk a lot today about senior players, but we're talking about performance and that. But it's a game for everyone. I think the social days for ladies are fabulous, but that's for some ladies. I don't think there's enough top-class lady players playing at the moment. Like you've Chrissy and Amy, you've Sue, and you've a few other Breeda White, and you've a few others like that. But you don't have 10. I think maybe it's a coaching problem. Maybe we need more coaching for ladies. It's something that needs to be looked at by the governing body. I think we need to get more better players into the game so as to encourage, I'm talking about ladies now, to encourage more girls to play the game, which is a problem. So, how do we improve the game? That's a couple of things. Spoke to Philip Manning about a senior international, a senior Irish team, and it's something that they said they will consider. I'm sure there's a huge interest in Spain and that, and through FIPA for that type of thing. And it's gas. People say, senior team. Go through it now. John, Ray Murphy, Chris Scannell, Anthony Galvin, myself. There's certainly Eddie Hennessy. There's certainly 7 or 8 like really good players. Like when you think of John and Ray Murphy.
Yeah.
So there is that. I'd love to see that, because I do think it's an important thing. That if you look at the age demographic of the game, it is something that there needs to be more. Everyone wants to play for Ireland. It's such an honour. I was in Lucan last year, and it was such an honour even to be watching. You were there, Philip.
I wasn't there now, but I was watching a lot of it online. I was away on holidays myself, so but yeah.
But it was such an honour even to watch it, playing for, and the lads just did us so proud, and the girls, and it was so competitive. And I looked at that and I said, God, that'd be great for seniors as well. So that's something, obviously, from a selfish point of view, I'd like to see introduced. And the whole website thing, I think, is important. And I think Jason opened everyone's eyes, because everyone I've met since has said, wow, that's brilliant. No, that's normal.
Yeah,
great job, but it's not like, you know, it's just really, really good work by Jason, who took the time to do it on off his own bat, you know.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say that it's not like it's took him 6 months to kind of develop or anything like that. It's a very straightforward, I suppose, formula in the background to integrate into the website to generate that data. So yeah, no, that's all very, very interesting, Tadhg, and I have to say I would agree with a lot of what you've said there. I think on the ladies' point of view, you know, you've obviously got your Chrissies that have, you know, done so much in the game, but my personal opinion is that we've got Amy Galvin, who in anyone's eyes is an absolute superstar of our game. You know, she is at the perfect age where she's got an opportunity, and if Pitch and Putt Ireland, you know, and the NEC, the governing body, got behind kind of an initiative with her at the forefront, you know, because of all of the things that she has done so far in the game, and no doubt she's going to be a very, very persistent figure in our game for a long time to come, as long as she sticks with it. But yeah, from my point of view, I think that's I think you're absolutely spot on with everything that you've mentioned there, and hopefully we can see more positive contributions from others involved in the game, as you mentioned with Jason, going into 2026. Tadhg, I would like to get your opinion on kind of the juvenile scene at the moment in the country. You know, it's obviously there's a lot going on. There's a lot of discussion with convention coming up, and juvenile officers up for contention. And where do you see the game from a juvenile capacity? Obviously, we haven't probably got enough in the game. We need more. It's an aging population. But what's your summary on where things are at with the juvenile side?
I think it's crucial. I think it's. I look at the game in three sections. I kind of look at the men, and then I look at the women, and then I look at the juveniles. I think each deserves its own, you know, encouragement. But the juveniles, and you know, you can go round and round in circles. They are, if you can keep them in the game, you're going to get 20, 30, 40 years out of them, you know, in terms of playing the game. It's the old story. If you look at around the country now, these are just people I know. Before anyone jumps up and down and says you never mentioned me, I probably don't know you, or I'm not aware of the good work you're doing. But I see John Cal in Fermoy, you know, Dahi down there, and John and his wife, and Dahi's down there, and the amount of juveniles they have. I called in, and I think they've 80. And I was chatting to him the other day, and he was saying that they had their Christmas competition, 30 or 40 turned out in dreadful conditions. It's that, there you go again, the volunteer thing. You know, they look at John, they look at Dahi, they say, wow, I want to be like them. That's what's happening down there in Fermoy. They're the two superstars, you know, and the young fellas and the girls, they want to be, you know, like them. And they've like 80 juveniles. Another one off the top of my head, in my own county that I'm playing for, Meath, Paddy Kelly and Trim. Wow, place is full of juveniles. So, you know, I spoke to him the other night at the AGM, and they're delighted with how it's going. In Trim, there's John Troy is just after stepping down from the board, but he was involved with juveniles in Meath as well. You know, they did a great setup there. And it's that volunteer. We're back to the, you know, trying to get someone in the club to take people under the wing. You know, that's what happened with Pádraig in Saxtown. There was a guy up there that was retired guard, and he took all these guys under the wing, and that's how the kind of juvenile section started in Saxtown. And it's the same with Pitch and Putt. Unfortunately, it's down to volunteers. It's getting someone who's a really good player, really helps. So Paddy Kelly, super player for years, senior. You have John Cahill, obviously, very, very good player. You know, has won national titles. And it's that type of player giving back to the game that's really, really helping in terms of, you know, those juveniles. Yeah, there's a couple of superstars down in Kerry. We know about them. There's the young guy in down around Baglanstown, Kelly. He's looks to be very, very good talent for the future. His father John is very encouraging. But that's where you're at. It's those people that are driving them. It's that John Kelly down there in Bagnallstown who's driving the son around. That's getting him to where he is, because he can't get to the competitions without, and you see it down in Kerry, drive all the way from there to the different competitions. I think there was one in Sea Point, and drive all the way up from there, and you bring your 3 or 4 guys up. It's a tough sell, but it's the only way forward. I do think, back to coaching, Philip. Yeah. I think if you said to me, what would I love to see the NEC do in the future, would be more emphasis on coaching, having better coaches. A bit like going back to the greenkeeping, you need to teach. So, more emphasis on getting more coaches, qualifications, and then trying to get them to go out and encourage people to play. There are, Stephen Ennigus, and you have Ger Holland and them, and Suzanne Jordan. They do a great job going around the schools, but it's still a tough sell when there's so much competition against them with GA and everything. Whereas if you get the likes of someone in a club, it's easier to try and hold on to them. So from a juvenile perspective, I think more coaching, better coaching for people, and then obviously trying to get it in the clubs, playing competitions. You look at Portmarnock, they've 200 juveniles. I think it's Freddie Poole. Yeah, Freddie Poole and Davey and Paul down there. They do a great job. There's 3 or 4 of them. Yeah, Freddie and Davey, they're in the game for about 1 million years. And there's another guy, Paul, down there, and they do a great job with the juveniles down there. They've about 200 of them. But it's very hard, and they'll tell you this, to convert them into members of the Pitch and Putt Club. Mm-hmm. An awful lot of them, and they've had some really good players. They get to a certain stage and then they go and play golf. So it's a tough sell, Philip, because it's cheaper to play golf now. When I was growing up, it was tough. It was hard to get into golf clubs. They were expensive. It's much more accessible now. Yeah. And you have public courses, Philip.
Yes. So which opens it up to them a lot more than what it may have been, as you mentioned, 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And clubs. I mean, we all know now you can buy a second-hand wedge for, 50 quid, 80 quid, whereas back in the day it was very, very expensive. So you just have more choice, so it's harder. But the only way forward is probably, having more coaches, and then relying on the likes of those guys that I mentioned, Freddie, John and Paddy, and all the others around the country. Listen, I'm not missing out anyone here. I just don't know you, or I'm not aware of what you're at. I'm sure there's plenty of good guys, with 3 or 4 players in their club, or 10 players. And that's the important thing going forward, because without juveniles, you're a dead duck.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And Tadhg, I suppose I appreciate all that insight, and as mentioned, I agree with everything you've said there for the last 10-15 minutes, but I want to kind of switch back just before we finish up, back to yourself. 2026, you mentioned you don't really have an off season with continuing to play, but I'm sure you've probably sat over the last couple of weeks and months and thought, what are the plans for 2026? What's your ambitions? What are your goals? Have you got anything kind of set out in stone yet, or is that still a kind of work in progress?
So today is, what day is today? Friday. Yeah. I played with Anthony Galvin on Tuesday in Tullamore, and we had this very conversation. So, and he wasn't surprised by my answer. He asked the very question you asked, what's your goals for 26? And I said, to improve. And he said, that's good. He said, I feel the same way. I said, Anthony, everyone needs a bit of luck to win. Winning is subjective. Kieran Earls has won 2 titles that I saw where his opponents were very poor. That's just a long week. It was very, very windy in one of them. And it was just, they were exhausted by the time they got to the end of it, and Kieran just outlasted them. In Glenville, he played very, very well. He got a lovely run in the middle of it. And it's just, winning is all about momentum, and things just open up, and there's no way you can, you just can't legislate for it. So a better way of looking at it, and from working with tour players and how I work, is, you said to me, well, what would you love to do for the season? I'd love to get down to, say, a stroke average of 49 or 47.99 or 48. I'd like to improve that type of way. I'd like to improve my ball striking. I'd like to improve my putting. So, hold more putts. And I think then that takes care of winning. Yeah. How many scratch cups have you mean? We had a great conversation, myself and Aggie, on Tuesday about, he was telling me how many scratch cups he's won where the other fellas collapsed. How many British Opens did Tom Watson win? I remember growing up, he was known as the choker of chokers, couldn't win, and the next thing he wins, 5 or 6, 5 Opens. But he will admit, I think 2 or 3 of them were handed to him. So I think it's very important, our listeners here today, we're all sitting here in January. Someone said to me, did you make a New Year's resolution? And I said, I did. Same one I make every year, more of the same. I think this thing of giving yourself these high, I want to win 2 scratch cups, it's subjective. You need a little bit of luck. So you're better off going down the road of, if you said to me, what advice, and I know you were asking me earlier, what advice would you give to younger players? All players. Junior ladies, listen up. This is how to improve. Play a bit more. Maybe get a bit of coaching if you're struggling with something, right? There's always someone to help. Go to a good player in the club. So if you're a junior lady and you feel you're struggling, there'll be some good player in the county. Just say, can you just show me how to grip the club, or whatever might be, annoying you, that type of thing. You need to play more. And, for me, it's, as I said, more of the same. Just try and do the little things every day well, the 1%. Just every single day, hit a few putts, hit a few shots. Try and play with people who are much better than you. Don't be embarrassed to be getting beaten. I drove up that road from Tullamore 10 times in a row and lost. And all I could hear was the lads laughing at me. But they weren't laughing on Tuesday. So I said to Aggie going out the gate, that's the first one. So, but that's what you have to put up with, Philip.
Yeah.
And this includes juveniles, and it includes our junior ladies and inter ladies. Don't be afraid. Put your neck on the block. Enter the competitions. Don't just play in the socials. There's nothing wrong with social days. They're great. I like an odd scramble every now and again.
Yeah.
Great crack with the lads. But put your neck in the block. Enter more competitions. You see the girls there from Clog, they enter everything. People are saying, God, they've improved very quickly. They haven't. They're playing and everything. They have to.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's not as if they picked it out of a lucky bag. And I think that's a great way of improving. There's a group of them. So if you have a group of juveniles, or try and hang around with 2. This is what I do. So I would have a group of friends in Kildare, with a group of friends in Meath and kind of Tullamore, and I would, in between them, play in different groups. So that's how you improve. And what you're going to find at the start, Philip, is you're going to lose every time. Every time. But, we've a game in Laytown on a Sunday, and I think for the first year I lost every time. But that's what you have to put yourself through. So my advice, to round up things to people who are listening to this today, well, what do I do in 2026? Well, if there's something plaguing your game, if you're hitting the ball left all the time or whatever, try and get some coaching. Ask a good player. You'd be surprised. You look at the likes of John Cahill and you'd look at them and you say, I wouldn't ask them anything. They're the nicest guys in the world.
Yeah, totally agree.
Ask them. They'll help you. Stephen Shower, are you joking me? He'd fall over himself to help you.
Yeah.
So, I know they look a little bit intimidating, but that's because of the way they, the work they put into the game. But try and ask someone who's really good in your club or a better player for help. Then when you get that kind of help, go out and do a bit of practice. What's practice? Playing 3 or 4 holes. Play 9 holes. It's not spending 10 hours hitting golf balls. It's just going out. If you're struggling with your chipping, go out and on a quiet evening, throw down a couple of balls and just chip and putt, chip and putt, chip and putt. That's what young people do. And unwittingly, they're improving through making mistakes. So my advice to anyone for 2026 is try and improve your game. Don't be too worried about making the club team or winning a scratch cupper. That'll all happen if you just, wander along and do a little bit of work. And that will be it for juveniles, for anyone taking the game up. That's the advice that, the likes of Stephen Shore would have been with me many times. We're great friends. And we just talk about performance stuff. What should I do? And exactly what I'm after telling you there is the bones of what I tell, Stephen Shore, John Cahill, those great players, what they should be doing. Exactly that. Repetition on a small scale, little and often. The tortoise will always win. So that's my tuppence worth on it today.
Yeah. Tadhg, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it, and I'm hoping that we obviously will have you on some more throughout the course of the year, which would be great, and I'm sure everyone will agree there's been a lot of insight there with this episode alone. So Tadhg, thanks for joining me, really appreciate it.
Not at all, Philip, and I want to wish you the best for the future. I think that this backspin idea is fabulous. I spoke to John Manning about it. He was very enthused about it, and I think it's a great way. It's a start of getting the game to go forward. So hopefully someone will see this. They might know Pádraig's name and they might be interested just to hear what I have to say. And I hope my enthusiasm for the game shines through, because I certainly love the game, and I think there's an awful lot of people in the game that love the game, and we all want what's best for pitch and putt.
Yeah.
And it's a game for the players. It should be run by the players, for the players, and for no one else. Okay?
Very, very well said, Tadhg. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Talk to you again. See you. Bye-bye.